everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm April Busby, and I'm the Outreach and Public Programs Manager. So my job is pretty much to put these on for you all. I want to thank you for joining us for this month's speaker series, From Pacific Shores to Columbia River Banks, Historical Traces of the Chinese Community in Vancouver and Washington, presented in partnership with Music Fusion Northwest. Today's presentation is sponsored in part by Humanities Washington, and our complete series is sponsored by the Historic Preservation Commission and Versa Audio, formerly Wager Audio. Our mission here at Clark County Historical Museum is to gather, save, and share the pieces and memories of Clark County's history. The Society has been performing this mission for more than 100 years, and the museum has been the center for storytelling for more than 50 years. The core ways we communicate the history of Clark County is through exhibits, programs, and events like this one. And we have quite a bit coming up with the museum, so I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on over the next couple of months. First of all, if you haven't had a chance to look around, we have 5 exhibits going right now. Currents of Progress, Clark County River Roads and Ports, is really about contextualizing what's happening in our waterfronts. So it discusses the history of water, transportation, and our ports, starting with our Indigenous community through today. Our 2020 Exhibit of Excellence winner is Music, Movement, and Sound. In there, we're looking at the history of music in Clark County, starting with our Indigenous community. We're really excited that part of the partnership with Music Fusion Northwest was that earlier this month, we were able to launch a refresh of the music exhibit with a case dedicated to music fusion. In our front gallery, we have History of Brewin. This looks at the history of European beer making in Clark County from the time that the Hudson Bay Company brought the first hops here to the Pacific Northwest through the microbrew movement today. And one of my favorite things to say is, if you ever want to know why the Pacific Northwest loves their hops, you can thank or curse the Hudson Bay Company for it. Her Story, which is in this gallery, is our 2021 Exhibit of Excellence winner. It came out during the lockdown, so many people have not had a chance to see it yet, but it was our attempt to contextualize what happened in Clark County for the ratification of women's right to vote and women's suffrage. And then finally, our newest exhibit is actually in our outdoor gallery. If you have not had a chance to check that out, it was done in partnership with the NAACP, and it's the NAACP exhibit Southwest Washington Black History Timeline. And it really looks at what's happened in Washington and then down to Southwest Washington and Clark County over the years for our African American community. Off-site, we also have our C-Tran exhibit, which is at the Vancouver Community Library on the 5th floor. We have all our panels across downtown Vancouver, new panels down in downtown Camas, and the exhibit at the Vancouver Amtrak station. And there's plenty more coming out, so keep an eye out. As for programs, now my favorite part. So History on Tap season is finally starting. So those of you who have been waiting for it, we actually will be starting History on Tap next Thursday on the 21st. We're back in the Kiggins Theater, and we're opening up History on Tap with Pat Gelada. So everybody can have a chance to come and see her as she talks about her career as Vancouver's and Clark County's historian. The speaker series will return May 5th. We will actually be over at the Covington House for that one, where we'll have Jim Pastillo talking about the history and development of Vancouver's water infrastructure. On May 12th at 7 p.m., we'll be streaming on YouTube for our 2nd annual virtual Night at the Museum. For those of you who got to see it last year, we got some fun new stuff for you this year. We're actually going to be doing some behind the scenes at local historic buildings, as well as having a fun time talking about kind of some of the engagement that you've seen doing and a little behind the scenes look at that. We have a lot going on coming up this summer as well. So just so you know, the Amazing History Race will be back for year 2. This year we're partnering up with the Police Activities League of Southwest Washington. For those who aren't familiar with it, that is our downtown Vancouver scavenger hunt. So that's coming up on June 12th. Our summer walking tours will begin June 18th. And Friday Night Flicks will be back in July, starting in July, with our movie screenings throughout July and into August. We're partnering up again with 4 other nonprofits for that, and we'll be screening A Night at the Museum on August 5th. If you want to keep track of all the stuff we're got going on, because as you can see, it's a lot, sign up for our email list. You can also follow at CCH Museum on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you'll receive updates on all our events and what we have coming up. If you like our programs, events, and exhibits, please get involved. There are 3 ways you can help us. Your time by volunteering with us, your energy by supporting us through sharing our exhibit, sharing what's going on, and letting people know what we have going on, or you can invest either as a member or as a sponsor of one of our programs. And now today's program. Since the late 19th century, Chinese immigrants to Vancouver and the Clark County, Washington, have contributed to the community life in various ways, creating a legacy that has remained poignant but also sparsely documented and imperfectly known. Tonight, Dr. Wang and Music Fusion Northwest offer glimpses of individual stories in their regional and international contexts based on materials from the Clark County Historical Museum and other sources. This presentation is intended both as a catalyst and an invitation for more community-driven discussions and connections around the local heritage of the Chinese community. This is a story that has not been told before, as far as we know, and it is a story that has a lot of holes. So we're hoping that this presentation and the work that we've been doing will help further collecting those stories. Dr. Wang is Associate Professor of History at Washington State University, where he teaches courses on China and East Asia. His early life and education in the Shandong province coincided with China's first 2 decades of reform. After immigrating to the U.S. in the 1990s, he pursued studies in intercultural communication and journalism before earning his doctorate in modern Chinese history at Carnegie Mellon. Dr. Wang's research focuses on China's late imperial modern ethnic history, with publications on state local relations in its southwest region. He lives here in Vancouver with his family. Music Fusion Northwest is a 501c3 nonprofit based in Vancouver, Washington. It aims to use music to empower students, inspire creativity and collaboration, increase cultural awareness, and build bridges between the cultures. In addition to Dr. Wang's presentation, we also have musician Hype, who will spend a period of time actually playing the not I apologize, I have tried, but so he will be actually playing for a bit during our presentation. And now Dr. Wang.
Well, thank you, April, very much for that introduction. When the museum approached me with this idea of talking about the Chinese community, I thought, wow, how thoughtful, how timely, given the time we live in, and the approach they are taking in terms of inviting not just the academics to share their expertise, but also community help. Because after all, much of this history we are talking about tonight really remains scattered, poorly documented, dimly known in many cases. They may be housed in various whole families or places that we still don't know. So much of this process of unearthing, knowing more about Chinese American history in the region will have to be done with partnership from the public, with help from various entities. At the same time, I also thought how brave of them to invite a professor to come up here to talk about history, because once you get them to start talking, you never know when they may stop or not, but I will try to make sure that we have the timing here right. As April also said during this presentation, I'll also be inviting Mr. Haibi to come up here and share a few pieces from his instrument, guzheng, called the Chinese zither. It's an instrument often associated with deep cultural sophistication, with many classical Chinese music pieces played on this kind of instrument. So it's a rare treat that we get to have this. Let me start by thanking the museum for inviting me, and also I want to thank Mrs. Ming Kwang from Music Fusion Northwest for really encouraging this. She did much in organizing it, and the logistics of it. Without her, this would be impossible. And also, I want to thank Mr. Bihai for agreeing to really treat us with his music in just a little while. So let me start our story with some broader context. I thought this would sort of help it make sense in terms of helping us see the ways in which the Chinese community here in Vancouver has kind of developed over time. Some of the reasons and processes behind all of this really have a lot to do with what happened on the other shores of the Pacific, in addition to even more shores, maybe in the South China Sea, but we're not going to go that far. I have this remote control here. Okay, great. Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, so very briefly, Chinese immigration to both the U.S. West, in terms of West Coast, this is California and Oregon, as well as the Pacific Northwest, Washington included, was a part of a broader population movement started in the 19th century, really emanating from the mainland part of China, specifically the southeast coast for the Chinese empire at the time called the Qing Empire. During that time, specifically in terms of the kind of people that immigrated eventually to North America, to the west coast of the United States, those people mostly came from the southeast part of China, today known as the provinces of Guangdong or Canton, as it used to be called, as well as Fujian. These two were responsible for really thinning out the vast majority. And in part because those regions historically had a long-standing tradition of immigration to other parts of the world. As this sort of a map on the left hand shows, 19th century Chinese outward immigration really had a number of routes. North America was one of them. Other places include South America, as well as Australia, parts of Southeast Asia. The causes were several, so it's not just one thing. But one main component in terms of why Southeast Chinese went out, left their homeland, was in part because of a marginalization process of their economic situation. Really starting from the late 18th century when the Chinese economy began to decline, people in that area gradually lost more access to land. They lost access to forest type resources, as well as other water-based, such as rice paddy economy. So as a result, many chose to leave their home in search of work. So there was already population movement even before their movements to North America. Another factor that came from the outside was during that time, the British commercial power, the British naval power also began to rise. And so what that did was to put pressure on southern part of China, southeastern part of China. And they, in addition to that pressure, for example, that pressure caused the people to also move away from some of the interior areas toward more of the coastal towns, which then prepared them for the subsequent voyage that they were going to take. Additionally, that British pressure also induced a number of conflicts between the British Empire and the Qing Chinese Empire, which then they had a number of clashes, but the end of that is that the Qing government, the Chinese government began to face tremendous pressure from that, which then helped start a number of major disturbances in the middle of the 19th century, collectively called by the historians as mid-century rebellions. There were several of them. Some of them are quite destructive. One of them, called the Taiping Rebellion, was particularly impactful on southern China because that's where it was located. When that thing was over, places were devastated, communities were broken up, but at the same time, it also forced the Qing government to relinquish its previous prohibition against going overseas, which then created opportunities for people to leave and go overseas in search of employment and other opportunities. And so this created what's called the Kudi labor trade, meaning that you have different companies in Southeast Asia, for example, as well as in North America, beginning to go to China to try to recruit people who would go to their plantations, could be construction sites, or could be mining sites, to provide that labor, oftentimes cheap labor. And then these people were called the coolies, and they would oftentimes enter into a contract, maybe a contract lasting for 3 years. And then once they get a contract signed, then they will leave home to go to different destinations to do the kind of work they often did. In other words, this created the kind of a background for the kind of people that initially did the migration in terms of their motivation for migrating, as well as the methods they used to leave home. And then narrowing it down to immigration to U.S. West and the Pacific Northwest. That coincided with U.S. expansion westward. That is, the United States was coming to the western regions. That created the labor needs. For example, on some of the mining sites in the California Gold Rush, something we are all very familiar, as well as the transcontinental railroad constructions. Companies were in competition with each other to try to see who can compete with such projects earlier. So the labor needs was there, and then the Kudi trade basically played into that labor market. This then created a labor-oriented Chinese immigration. Immigrants, this generation of immigrants basically came to offer labor because that was what was available to them. Because of various reasons, such labor immigration could cause and did cause frictions with people in the host country, United States, for example, which then are responsible for creating various kind of anti-immigration or anti-Chinese sentiments. One of them was called the Yellow Peril campaign, depicting these immigrants, again, who were laborers, right, lower social class laborers, as a kind of a competitor, as a kind of a threat, if you will, to social order. Then you have a series of U.S. immigration policies designed to restrict that gradually, and then that culminated in the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. And what that act did was to prohibit further immigration. No more laborers could be brought to China. And so because of that, and then coinciding with some of the termination of the railroad project, that meant more people, more of the Chinese laborers began to go out of California and move northward. So they end up coming to this area in the Pacific Northwest. I have a little picture here of Fort Vancouver in 1845, basically showing that in this still largely frontier kind of a town community, the military had a dominant presence in terms of the community makeup. So I'm very grateful for the Clark County Museum here for helping me with providing some of the census data, that we have some numbers at least to kind of get an idea of this very first generation of Chinese immigrants, what they were like, what the community was like. And so as I look through these records, several things kind of stand out as the predominant features. Number one, most of them were in the 20s, mid-20s or mid-30s, incredibly young people, which makes sense. They came here to do work, right? Hard physical work. Only 4 people were in their 50s. So it made me curious about, why they came here. So that could, the census doesn't give us any reason or an explanation about, their background, but it does provide a lot of, opportunities for us to ask questions about these people. They're also predominantly single male, single men. I counted all the records that we have. Altogether, from 1850 to about 1887, you have about 171 people that's recorded on the census. This doesn't mean that we're only 171 people in Vancouver. It simply means that the census only listed 171 people. Only one of these is listed as a female. Her name's Lois Curry. I don't know what this is obviously a English rendering, right, of her Chinese name, and I no way of knowing what the original form might be like. She was aged 17 at the time of the census. And then I noticed next to her is listed a man called John Curry, same last name, so probably even related to each other. She could be his relative or even family member, possibly. And his age was 30, so about 13 years older than she was. And also, I looked through the list. You see also some common family names in there, indicating possible family relations. If that's the case, you could have the case where people immigrating together. You may have like a brother and sisters, or even husband and wife, or parents and children doing it together. This is also a group predominantly working class in terms of their position. In terms of the occupation that's listed on the census, 17 of them was listed as laborer, without further specification about what kind of a labor were they doing. 3 of them were listed as a watchman, 4 as a cook, and 2 as servants. 2 were merchants. Later on, if you look at the later census, you can get a little sense about what those merchants possibly could mean. This could indicate people operating little stores, maybe some kind of a small trade, which then by 1910 could mean that they were beginning the process of getting economically better off. Of the total of 171 people, 34 of them had listed 115 without a name actually on the record. Their name is collectively known as called Chinaman. It's sort of given us their name. Probably a further indication this is again, working class group of people. These laborers, once they came to the United States, apparently also interacted with our ecology here, our environment here, in that we have 2 little pieces of curious references here. One's called the China Ditch, another Shanghai Creek. Apparently some kind of a construction work. Oh, what about one? Oh, is that right? So apparently located somewhere like in today's 172nd Street, somewhere like to the east of here. It looks like it could be possible group of Chinese laborers were employed here in creating this project. And again, we don't know a whole lot more about who were employed and what happened to these people. But again, here maybe the community can come in to kind of provide, if anybody has more information on either one of these, that would be an interesting thing to discover. Then we come, next census record we have is 1910. So about 40 years has elapsed, right, from the 1860s. By this time, if you compare the records from the previous one, we see the community size decreased, basically from the 171, right, group size previously, now to about less than half of that, 85 people left in this. And among these 85 people, I counted there was one large family that had at least 10 people. So if you exclude this one big family, you have even a smaller community here. We here see marriage and family begin to emerge. No longer was this community just solely single, unmarried people. And now of this 85 people, 18 men had marital status specified as married. and 16 of them as single, because they specifically said those people were single. You have some men who said they were said to be married, others were left blank. We don't know whether they were either single or married. But at least this tells us you at least have 18 people, 18 men who were married. Again, one man whose last name is Li, his wife is also listed, and plus there are 8 children. And there's a reference in there that says they are born in California. So that tells us they came actually from California, at least those children did. So this indicates that by this time you have a movement and relocation among these immigrants. Few people in the 1850s and 1860s period appeared in the 1910 report. So this can tell us it's possible that they either left Vancouver for some reason, or for some reason their name failed to be recorded. Which, if that's the case, this means that these 85 people could largely be from other parts of the United States, California included. Occupation-wise, domestic service and laundry work were pretty prominent. By this time of the census work, you have a lot of domestic servants, for example, as well as specific references to Chinese laundry work. Food industry employs quite a few people. And if you look through the census records, it specifies different kind of food industry workers. So you have a cook, baker, and chef. Again, we don't know exactly how each one of these is defined by this census time, but possibly indicating some kind of emerging specification, right, or stratification among these people. Maybe somebody who's done more cooking, maybe called a chef, as opposed to just a cook. Children from this Li family, they are listed as they could read and write. So in other words, you have a literacy here beginning to emerge in the second generation of this immigrant community. So there are some of the snapshots here that we see. At this point, according to the program, can I invite Mr. Haibi here to kind of play a piece on his zither instrument? He chose some pieces that have some historical echoes to this kind of immigration experience that we've been talking about. So go ahead, please. Thank you very much for that performance. So continuing with our story, having gone over some of the broader picture of the community, we are pretty fortunate in being able to find some pieces of information on a couple of individuals. We even have individual people with pictures of their faces. Something that historians often find something that's very valuable. One of these, let me go back. This one. By the name of Wen Chin, with a picture of there we go. With a picture of him, with a cap, hat, and a gun. And you notice a fan in his hand, a scroll, some kind of a book in his other hand. Possible indication of a gentry status. Of course, if you look at a picture of this in 19th century China, you would possibly, you can interpret this person to belong to either a landed person, gentry status, so possibly lower to middle class in the society at the time. So the piece of information we have about him comes from Clark County Genealogical Society. There's a quote here: the General Anderson family were at the barracks 12 years, about from 1886 to 1898. During that time, they had a Chinese man named Wen Qin, who practically ran the household. He practically ran the household. Okay, another intriguing reference, possibly some kind of a role he played in being a household manager, could be. This also can tie back to the fact that part of Eastern China historically also has a lot of people who were in the trade of managing household finances for other wealthier households. We don't know exactly whether he was from that background or not, but this is at least a possibility, given the fact that he was able during this time to have this kind of an influence in that household. Another person we found that's really interesting is by the name of Kwang Lai. Later on, his records is also known as Kong Loi. Again, this will be a name form that's from southern part of China. He has received quite a bit of media attention, apparently, because there's quite a few pieces about him in the newspaper. So we are able to know a bit more about this particular gentleman. He was born in 1867 from Guangdong province, again, that canton as it used to be called. He immigrated in 1881 via Portland, Oregon, and he worked as a dairyman. So apparently some kind of dairy farm or dairy business. And this picture here is a little bit of a piece here in the newspaper with a picture of him indicating that he was, okay, that little thing has a mind of its own. This is a picture of him wearing this, he's wearing this broad smile on his face. It's a little maybe hard to see given how dark the photo is, but he's smiling broadly, and apparently with his unbridled kind of happiness or joy on his face, holding a bird between his two hands. Okay, so there. And this little blurb under the picture says that he found a bird called Chinese pheasant in a hayfield. And so apparently he really enjoyed that sight. The next piece of news we have him, he's become sorrowful next time because he was denied, his application for US citizenship was denied. Looks like unexpectedly, apparently because he's been in the community for a very long time, contributed to the community in various ways, apparently. We're going to see more of that. He was, again, a well-known Vancouver businessman here, and yet he was denied citizenship with, again, no explanation about the reason for his denial. More information about him. Then in 1915, we find him involved in a little controversy happening in Vancouver here. The Vancouver Grand Opera House was planning on putting on a show, a play called Trunk Murder in China, the Trunk Murder Mystery in Chinatown, I'm sorry. this is a story that happened in New York City at the time when there were reports about a white girl murdered in a trunk in an apartment near the apartment of another Chinaman. So that was the mystery. There was suspicion that he probably did it, he was the murderer. There were also suspicion that maybe it's another person who was involved in a love triangle who did the murder. In any case, this man ran away, and the authorities didn't really find him in the end. So this whole thing remained a mystery about who exactly was the murderer. And then there was a further mystery showing that the dead body of the white girl may not be the person that they reported her to be. So anyway, there was a lot of this going on, swirling around. And then there was a play made about it. So the Vancouver Grand Opera House was wanting to put this on. For some reason, Kang Loi opposed that idea. He objected to having this play be put on. I think that's set on automatic play or something. So he objected to this idea. And then after that, the mayor of Vancouver here, Mr. Kiggins, he went to a rehearsal of this show, and after seeing part of it, he said, "Oh, the play's fine." So the play ended up getting performed in the theater. And then there's also further report, an effort was made to have the sheriff and county attorney stop the performance, but they didn't. They would not act. And then another little thing, a fight was thought to have broken out in a dispute over the melodrama, with someone actually getting injured in this process. That's another thing. Very interesting reference when you think about a Chinese immigrant objecting to a play, right, being put on in this local theater. He apparently was involved in some kind of a cultural dispute with the theater. So very interesting information indeed about, it shows at least his sort of thinking at this time, his concern about possibly the cultural implications, right, of this kind of play being put on. Next, oh, here we go. Is that right? Okay, yeah. The New Era Chinese band. There was a band. We have a Chinese band here in Vancouver history, and here's a picture of them. What got me really interested is actually how they dressed. I mean, look at the uniform. This is 1914. You have kind of almost like they dress almost in uniform, which then is really curious because the idea in that time, not only in China, but really throughout East Asia, in 1914, everything has to be new. The idea of newness was just all over, sweeping over East Asia. And part of being new was to dress exactly like how these people dress, with this kind of jacket, streamlined dress, indicating you're new. Now you're putting on a new fashion, as opposed to, do you guys remember the Wen Qing, how he was dressed in a gown and with a cap hat? Now they are dressing in this almost modern, even military-looking type of a uniform. Of course, they have the instrument. They're marching on a 4th of July celebration. So another interesting snippet of this. More on the Loi family here. We have a picture of him with his family, lovely family here, and various kind of a news report. One of them actually reported their wedding, his wedding.
It's on automatic advance.
Yeah. There we go. So his wedding was reported with also a picture of their, the marriage certificate, properly signed by all the relevant authorities, indicating this is a respectful, proper marriage. And then you'll have a long newspaper article called Chinese Dairyman Overcomes Barriers to Success, calling him a successful businessman. And then the other piece is talking about his wife also playing an active role in the local community. She was part of different kind of organizations that were pretty prominent in the community. So we're looking at a pretty well-known family here, the Loy family, possibly telling us why he would want to be involved in a cultural dispute about a play, right, in the Vancouver theater. One more. Not only his Loy and his wife, but his kids, his children, seem to have done rather well. One of them, Percy Loy, actually served as a lieutenant in the Second World War in California. Upon retire, that's that right? Yeah. So that's a picture of him, Percy Loy. Yes. And so he served in the war, and after he retired, he got into business here in Portland and became also quite successful, apparently. The news article on the right is talking about putting up a new gate for the Chinatown, and for that they were trying to recruit money from different organizations. Each one of them donated to this project. So apparently an effort to beautify, expand the Chinatown project. And so this is another bunch of individuals that we're able to find in in our archive here in the Clark County Museum. I am sure there's many more others, and it'll be really fascinating if we can unearth more such individual stories, because they give us a range, right, of their encounters and experiences. So now Mr. B, again, he has another piece of music to play, and I'll invite him to come. Thank you so much. Okay. Is ready to go for the next slide? Okay. So this picture here, continue with our story. We're now in the 1970s, a new era really in the, oh boy, it goes faster than I do. A new era in terms of Chinese immigration history here. This is a new period with new kinds of immigrants coming here. We have a picture showing a businessman, Mr. Jerry Lee. He's here greeting his customers to this new restaurant. Apparently, he just recently opened. This is 1975. It's a Chinese restaurant on Fourth Plain Boulevard. So the decor and his dress with the glasses and haircut indicating a respectful, this is a respectful businessman in our community by this time. This then has to do with the kind of features that Chinese immigration had to the community, to the Vancouver community, really beginning in the 1950s. By this time, the reasons for coming here, for immigrating to this Pacific Northwest region, had expanded beyond just merely to provide labor, right, as they happened previously. And now, or in terms of the immigration origin, we have a couple of different cases. Number one, people from Taiwan came to North America in considerable number. That's at the end of the Second World War. So the kind of Taiwanese people who came to America or to the Pacific Northwest tended to be from families or communities of upper to upper middle class background. They could possibly also be members of the government or the military or certain members of the academia. So when they came to North America, sometimes the purpose for immigration was to pursue further education, sometimes even to pursue a kind of a semi-retirement lifestyle. In that if they were able to buy some real estate here in different parts of the United States. Another source of immigration was from Hong Kong after 1990s. There was fear about the Chinese takeover of Hong Kong Island. So business people, as well as other people from other walks of life, went out from Hong Kong. Many landed in North America as well. So this is also predominantly a business-oriented group. After 1980s, when China began to open a little bit more to interaction with the outside world, you begin to have more immigrants coming from North China, northern regions of China, in addition to southern China as well. By this time, the kind of people that immigrated to North America included many academics, many, in fact, students who came here to universities and schools in pursuit of education. And in addition to these three, you also have, another one that's a continued internal migration. Chinese people would come to the Pacific Northwest, to Vancouver, to Oregon from other parts of the United States. Not done, quite done yet. And also, if you look at some of the broader information on this community, we find size continue to increase. More and more people have begun to come here, and family continuity seems to have getting better. Previous generations probably stay here only for a limited duration. Some then choose to go away after a period. Now you begin to have families putting down roots. They begin to have a second generation, some even begin a third generation. So they're more stable now in Vancouver community. Occupational diversity, community participation continued to widen by about 1990s, really going into 2000s. We pretty much find Americans participating in almost all walks of life here in our community, in terms of whether it's technology, business, education, government, or other type of services, you can find them there, all of these. And they participate in community events in more diverse forms as well. And also we see social, cultural, religious communities begin to take a more organized form. You begin to have churches being formed, for example. You begin to have Chinese stores and businesses, even schools, language programs, and so on and so forth. Some of this picture here also are from a program the Chinese community here put on, basically pretty much around the Chinese New Year time, Chinese Lunar New Year time, when they usually would have a cultural kind of a program there. Of course, during the pandemic, we don't have this anymore, but they used to have these kind of activities. So my time is up. To sum up, in other words, we're looking at a community here that's been here for different reasons during different periods of history. Now they are part of the community unity, playing active role. They have different diverse experiences historically. So a really rich kind of legacy that we have here in the Vancouver community. And my hope is that going forward, we may be able to have many more of such opportunities where you have the community can come together, whether it's academic community or just the public, or say our museum community can sort of collectively discover more about our past roots. After all, the story of the Chinese community is a part, right, of the bigger story that we all share together here in Vancouver, Washington. Thank you all very much for your attention. I'm finished. So, I think we only have like 2 or 3 minutes left. What do you want me to do with that?
So if anyone has any questions and Dr. Wang is willing to answer them.
Not even answer, but I'd love to. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
With the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, and then we saw some people in some of the later censuses, and then it's almost like a jump from 1882 to 1970. Was the Exclusion Act repealed, or?
It was around 1943-ish. Yeah, so it was in fact from 1882 to shortly before the Second World War ended in 1945. 1983, it was repealed. But it did its work. What it did was to prevent more laborer from being able to immigrate to the United States. So that, by the fact, that created a single male community in North America. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
You spoke a lot about them coming here for labor and for business. I'm wondering if perhaps after World War II, maybe the 50s and 60s, did they start coming here for freedom?
During the 50s and 60s, even 1970s, immigration largely included the people from Taiwan and Hong Kong, because the mainland part of China was closed off. So people from Taiwan could include former government officials. After their retirement, they could go out. Members of the military and their children. So you see their goal of coming to North America, including getting education. They go to school. Some come here because they like to have a more spacious place to live, or a place to live. Taiwan being a crowded place, especially in northern part of Taiwan. So they could purchase houses here and just live here in a semi-retirement type of lifestyle. And then after 90s, people from Hong Kong, again, many of them include the business people, in financial services, for example, or in different kinds of international trade. You also have a lot of, from my understanding, is people who were in the real estate business. So they also came here in considerable number. So in a sense, they came here to partake, I think, in this North American society and the lifestyle here.
Okay, I was just thinking in terms of like the depression in China, were they ever coming here to escape that?
They couldn't. In the 1950s to the 70s, they don't have permission to go abroad. So they couldn't get out of mainland China.
I came in 1969 from Hong Kong. I didn't come here for freedom. I came here for education and for the opportunity. Not for freedom.
So freedom.
In Hong Kong, we have freedom. More freedom than you have here.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Thanks very much. This is the kind of discussion we want. Yeah.
How did, especially like in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, how did the men bring wives into this country? so they could marry and create the family.
If a man is from a laborer class, they would not be able to bring any woman folk to the United States because the Chinese Exclusion Act was still in effect. My understanding here, I'm not a really big expert on this one, but if they are from a wealthier merchant class, that possibility may exist, that they could somehow bring in their wives. But in places like Chinatown, San Francisco, for example, you have a predominantly single male community who are unable to reproduce. Yes.
In those days, the Chinese, when they came here, after the railroad was built, were they working in the hop business?
In what business?
Hops, making beer.
Oh, were they in the
Hops, yeah.
beer business?
Yeah.
I do not know.
In the
I don't have any
farm.
information on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Up in Chihuahua, there's a fellow by the name of Ezra Meeker, who started hops up there in that area. And
In which
he
area? I'm
employed
sorry.
Chinese laborers.
I looked through the census data from 1910. Quite a few people working in the Fruit Valley area on farms. So they were involved in agriculture, in farming community. I don't know what they grew exactly.
So did they build all the railroad along Columbia River, the Chinese labor?
I don't really know that specifically about which
side.
tracts. The transcontinental line, I think that line along Highway 84 also employed some of the Chinese laborers.
And how about cross-Canadian railroad? Was it also built by Chinese?
I do not know much about that project. I'm sorry.
I think after the railroad, quite a bit of Chinese people living in the Dallas for the can business, like seafood can business. That's
Okay.
my husband's father. He was working over there.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay. Yeah, that would fit with the broader information that is after those railroad projects were completed, right? They no longer needed those Chinese laborers to work on the railroad projects, so that they had to find other lines of work. So yeah, maybe some of them went into the food industry as well as other places. Yeah, please.
This is a strange question, but you always hear about Chinese laundries, and I'm just wondering what that association is. Does it have to do with low status labor for the laborers, like something that, a way that they could get crippled into business? Or is that something that would be very common in China and it was just a skill set that they brought in? Do you know anything about that?
There were 5 records in the 1910 census talking about people who were laundry workers, and then you have 3 other references talking about some of these laundry workers in fact did a large volume of laundry. So this indicates a commercialized operation. This is not just your household type of laundry service. So I think what's going on here very probably is that you have some Chinese laundry workers who initially probably worked in a household setting, working for someone. And then over time, they were able to operate their own laundry setting. They could rent part of a house or something like that and do laundry. I've heard also other publications talking about this transition process, being able to set up their own operation, given the nature of this line of work. Yeah, you're right. We still don't know very much about the Vancouver people here. There's a couple records indicating that some of these laundry workers possibly worked for a military officer. So in that case, you may have a house. This is the household type of work. But the 3 others, the size of the operation was in fact quite large. Yeah, so possibly just the 2 coexisted. I would think. Yeah.
And also, my wife was just adding that back in those early times especially, it was almost all men, white or Asian. And so there weren't women to do the laundry. So the men needed a laundry.
Yeah.
One theory.
One theory. Yeah, I wish I knew more about, like, what's the ratio between men versus the women in terms of, who work in the laundry business. My understanding is some men also were involved in that too. Yeah. Okay.
I want to thank.
With that, thank you so very much.
I want to thank Ivy. And then I want to actually bring up our Min, our connection and the co-founder of Request. If you have not had a chance to see the case on Music Fusion, please take a moment to take a look at it. Also, if you have any information, I heard some people have information about relatives and such who are here or in the area. We'd love to work with you to try and collect some of that information. And if you know people who have family stories, etc., about this history, we would love to connect with you. Our public historian Katie's out there, so she's the one you want to talk to. We are really just starting to delve into this story, and we'd love to see it grow and see what we can find out. And this is true about all our communities. We have a historical record that has traditionally kept certain communities out of it or has minimized their story, and it's really crucial to bring these stories out, be it of the Chinese community here or the LGBT community, the women's community, etc. So please, we would love to talk to you all and see what we could do about finding some of this.
Can I add one story here?
Yes, by all means.
I have a friend, okay, he passed away at the age of 97. I was one of his forebearer, okay, from his called Dr. Lam. In 1963, his wife passed away, Chinese wife. So he was in Oregon, Portland, Oregon. And then he found an American wife. He wanted to get married with the American wife in Oregon. At that time, 1963, it was not allowed for any American to marry Chinese. So he has to come to Vancouver, Washington here to get married. So the two states are so close to each other, they have a different law.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very romantic here.
Because of your name, Romeo? Where's Juliet?
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I hope to see you again soon. And have a good evening.
Thank you.
So we were streaming today. I will say it's kind of a weird thing, but we'll also bring the next one. It'll actually be
And I've been in Shandong a couple of times here in town. I went there in 1987 to contacts at Ray Farm in Pumpkin Point. And talking to them, I said, I'll send you something about, So I've had a lot of fun with China. Yes, yeah. I was elected president in October. I retired from Washington Technology in September. They conned me into Yes, I just like it. I want to bring it to that music. Also, by the way, there was a regional effort to tell the story. I was in Tacoma recently to the Chinese Exclusion Act. And we're looking at this from a kind of regional perspective. And it's time that humor is part of this story. So thank you for your research. By the way, a couple of my notes are off because my son is already in.
Yeah, sure, there's another dimension.
I think we will have a conversation.
I try my best to match the final
About 2 years ago, we moved to virtual office because we don't have to do these lawsuits. Oh, very good. I'm really happy to see you in Vancouver with these guys. And you live here in Vancouver? Oh, okay. Thank you for coming.
乡下都有。非常好，这个是咱们的热度。
It's nice to have him here. Thanks for making this happen.
We miss this event, face to face.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Have you been to the Grant House restaurant on Officers Row? Can you see Kwan's window in the back? Yeah, that's the guy. There's a story about him. We should dredge up somehow, yeah. It's a good one.
There's so much history.
Right, right. So, tell me something about your class at WSU.
I teach
Tell people
China.
about- Oh, yeah.
East Asia,
Oh, very good.
world history.
Right.
So the China part is, you have basically your survey class, which goes from beginning to now, but also more running class.
I just say congratulations to you.
See you later. Take care.